Lila sank onto the worn couch of her small apartment, letting out a tired sigh. The walls were chipped, the paint peeling, and the shelves sagged under the weight of books and old trinkets. Moving in had been rushed, and she had never had time or money to make the space feel like home. Every corner reminded her of the things she hadn't finished, the life she hadn't settled into. She looked around, imagining how it could be brighter, warmer, more inviting, but her imagination felt heavier than her energy. This tiny apartment, which was supposed to be a fresh start, now felt more like a cage. The phone buzzed on the table. Beside her, she picked it up lazily, expecting another bill reminder or a mundane message from a coworker. Instead, she saw a name that made her heart skip. Ethan. Ethan, her boss's son. She hadn't thought of him in years, not since they were teenagers running around his father's office building while their parents tried to manage work and family obligations. The memory made her smile briefly, tinged with something she couldn't identify, a mix of nostalgia and something else, something unexpected. The message was simple: "I can help with the repairs." Ethan. Lila blinked. Her fingers hovered over the screen, unsure if she should reply. Did he mean it? Was he just being polite? Or was there some other reason he wanted to help her? She hadn't expected him to appear in her life like this. Her mind raced with questions, doubts, and a strange flutter of excitement. She typed back hesitantly, "Sure, if you really want to, I could use a hand." Hours later, there was a knock on the door. Her heart jumped. When she opened it, there he was, Fen, holding a toolbox, wearing a casual shirt that hinted at a broad frame and a smile that seemed to have remembered her name from years ago. "Heard you needed a hand," he said casually. But the warmth in his tone made her cheeks flush. At first, they moved through the apartment with a kind of awkward efficiency. He handled the tools with ease, fixing the crooked shelves, tightening loose screws, and repainting walls that had long been forgotten. Lila watched him silently, noting how naturally he worked, how confident and capable he seemed. She had always admired him as a kid, but now, seeing him grown, his presence stirred something new, something she hadn't expected. Every brushstroke, every movement he made drew her attention, made her heart beat a little faster. She tried to focus on her own tasks, but her eyes kept wandering, catching him in small, quiet moments of concentration. They talked as they worked. At first, the conversation was practical discussions about paint colors, shelving options, and whether the living room lamp should go near the window or the corner. Then, slowly, the conversation deepened. He asked her about her day, her work, her little routines, and Lila found herself talking more openly than she had in weeks. There was a gentle rhythm to their words, an unspoken understanding that made the apartment feel less lonely. She laughed more than she had in a long time, sometimes at his small jokes, sometimes at the way he made ordinary chores seem fun. As the hours passed, Lila realized how much she had missed having someone's presence nearby. Someone who cared enough to help without asking for anything in return. She felt a connection forming, subtle but undeniable, something that went beyond gratitude. There was an ease in his manner, a kindness in his patience, a light in his eyes that made her forget the peeling walls and sagging shelves. And yet, beneath the comfort, there was a flutter of tension, a hint of something more, something unspoken. Every time their hands accidentally touched while passing a tool, a spark ran through her. She quickly pulled her hand back, but the warmth lingered, a reminder that her feelings were shifting in ways she didn't understand. By late afternoon, the apartment looked transformed. The walls were smooth, freshly painted in a gentle cream color. The shelves aligned perfectly, and even the corners seemed to shine under the clean light. Lila stepped back to admire the space, but her attention kept returning to Ethan. There was a subtle change in the air, a quiet intimacy that had grown with each shared moment. She realized that the simple favor he had offered had done more than fix her apartment. It had stirred something inside her, a feeling she hadn't anticipated and couldn't ignore. As they cleaned up the last of the tools, Lila felt a pang, of reluctance. She didn't want this day to end, didn't want the apartment to be complete if it meant he would leave. She found herself searching for reasons to prolong his stay, to keep him near, even as she tried to appear casual. Ethan seemed to sense it. He lingered near the doorway, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Looks good," he said softly, almost as if speaking to himself. "You've really made this place yours." Leela nodded, swallowing hard. "It feels different now," she admitted. The words were almost a whisper, but they carried the weight of everything. She was feeling gratitude, relief, and something deeper. Something that scared her. He stepped closer, just enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "I'm glad I could help," he said, but there was a pause, a hesitation in his tone that made her heart flutter wildly. She wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to hear more, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she smiled nervously, pretending to focus on the last brush of paint she was wiping from the counter. The room seemed to shrink around them, filled with an unspoken tension, the kind that makes ordinary moments feel electric. Lila tried to steady herself, telling herself it was just gratitude, that she was imagining feelings that weren't really there. But every glance, every shared laugh, every accidental brush of hands told her otherwise. Finally, Ethan picked up his toolbox, signaling that he was about to leave. Lila's chest tightened. She didn't want him to go, but she couldn't say anything without sounding desperate. "Thanks again." "For everything," she said softly. He smiled, a small, knowing smile that made her knees weak. "Anytime, Lila. I'll check in later, see how it's holding up," he said. And just like that, he was gone, leaving her in the newly refreshed apartment. But more aware than ever of the feelings he had stirred in her, Lila sat down on the couch again, her body tired from the work, but her mind racing. She thought about the way he had looked at her, the way his hands had moved, the warmth that seemed to linger in the room long after he left. She realized, with a mix of fear and excitement, that she was beginning to feel something she hadn't expected: an attraction, a longing, a connection that went beyond friendship. She tried to shake it off, telling herself that he was her boss's son, that this was inappropriate, that it would never work. But the more she tried to suppress it, the stronger it grew. She found herself replaying every moment in her mind, the small smiles, the jokes, the quiet glances. Each memory made her heart ache in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. As night fell, the apartment felt quieter, emptier, but also warmer somehow. The repairs were finished, but the true change had happened within her. She didn't know what would come next, didn't know if she would ever see Ethan again. But one thing was certain. A simple favor had altered her heart in ways she never could have predicted. And then, as she was about to close the window blinds, she saw a movement outside. Ethan was standing across the street, looking up at her window. Their eyes met for a brief second, and Lila's heart skipped a beat. Before she could call out, he turned and walked away, leaving her with a sense of longing and a question she couldn't answer. Was this just a kind gesture, or had something more begun between them? Lila sat back on the couch, her thoughts tangled, and her emotions spinning. She knew life had changed today, though she didn't yet understand how. Something had been set in motion, something quiet, gentle, but powerful. And deep down, she wondered if the next time he came, it wouldn't just be about fixing shelves or painting walls, might be about fixing hearts, too. The rain started gently the next morning, tapping against the window of Lila's apartment in soft, rhythmic patterns. She had barely slept, thinking about Ethan. His sudden appearance the day before had left her heart unsettled, fluttering with feelings she didn't understand. She tried to convince herself it was just excitement, nothing more. But every time she recalled his smile or the way his hand had brushed hers, she felt a warmth she couldn't ignore. She found herself checking her phone compulsively, hoping for a message. When none came, a pang of disappointment struck her chest. She had no reason to expect him to reach out. After all, he was just helping with the apartment. But a small part of her had hoped for more. was absurd, she told herself, yet undeniable her mind and heart refused to let go of the memory of his presence. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Leela jumped, her pulse quickening, and opened it to find Ethan standing there again, holding a small tray with 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said. Softly, his voice calm yet intimate, almost as if he understood her thoughts without words. Her breath caught. The sight of him standing there, close yet hesitant, made her forget to respond. "Thank you," she managed, taking a cup from him. He stepped inside and they settled on the newly repaired couch, sipping in comfortable silence. The rain outside provided a quiet soundtrack, a gentle curtain that made the apartment feel like a separate world where only the two of them existed. At first, they spoke in small talk about the weather, about minor things at her workplace, and about trivial plans. But slowly the conversation deepened, moving into the terrain of personal stories, hopes, and unspoken regrets. Leela shared memories of her childhood, times when she felt uncertain or overlooked, and Ethan listened, genuinely interested. Told her stories, too, of his own insecurities, of the pressure of living up to expectations, moments that shaped him. There was a vulnerability in his words that made Leela's chest tighten. She realized she had never seen him like this before. He was no longer the confident, slightly distant boy she remembered. He was a man who could be open, patient, and sincere. The more he shared, the more she felt drawn to him, a pull she couldn't explain or resist. Every glance, every laugh, every pause carried a weight of intimacy, and she felt herself leaning closer, even when no one had told her to. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's visits became frequent. Sometimes he came with tools, sometimes with groceries or coffee, other times simply to keep her company while she sorted through boxes or arranged her furniture. Each visit, no matter how ordinary, made Leela's heart race. She noticed the subtle ways he paid attention, the way he adjusted a picture frame so it hung straight, the way he remembered her favorite tea, the small smiles he gave when she said something funny or thoughtful. And yet, beneath the growing warmth, there was an unspoken tension. Leela questioned every interaction, wondering if she was imagining feelings that weren't there. She worried about boundaries, about what her boss would think, about what it meant to feel this way about someone who had been in her life in a different, simpler context. But every time she tried to suppress her thoughts, Ethan did something small, something so human, so gentle that her walls crumbled. One rainy evening, they were painting her bedroom together, the room now bright and filled with the scent of fresh paint. They worked quietly, side by side, brushes moving in rhythm with each other. Then, as if by instinct, their hands met over a paint-stained tray. Neither pulled away immediately. Instead, they lingered, feeling the warmth of the moment, the subtle electricity in the touch. Lila's heart pounded in her ears, and for a moment, neither spoke. The world outside the window seemed distant, the rain a soft echo. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. I've been meaning to tell you something," he said, his voice low and unsteady. Lila's stomach tightened. She looked at him, searching his eyes for clues, but I didn't know if I should. Her breath caught. The anticipation was almost unbearable. "If you can tell me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft patter of rain. He hesitated, then took a deep breath. I think about you more than I should. Every time I come here, I feel something different, something I've never felt before." Lila's heart leaped. She had suspected it, felt it, but hearing him say it aloud made her emotions spiral in ways she hadn't anticipated. She wanted to respond, to confess the longing she had tried to ignore, but words failed her. Instead, she smiled shyly, a blush creeping across her cheeks. "I feel the same," she admitted, her voice trembling. Slightly, the room seemed to hold its breath. For a long moment, they simply stood there, aware of each other, aware of the shift that had occurred between them. The intimacy wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, subtle, and profoundly real. Lila realized that this connection had grown. naturally, almost imperceptibly, until it became impossible to ignore. Over the following days, their interactions deepened. Ethan would find excuses to stay longer, to linger in conversation, to share small moments that felt meaningful. Lila noticed the way he remembered the little details: her favorite mug, the way she liked the living room arranged, the stories she had told him in passing. She realized that in these small attentions, there was a tenderness that went beyond friendship, a desire to understand and be present. Lila's emotions became a whirlwind she struggled to contain. Every time he smiled at her, every time his hand brushed hers, she felt her heart soar and then sink with uncertainty. She wanted to trust the feelings, to surrender to the connection. But fear always lingered. Fear of what it meant. Fear of expectations. Fear of heartbreak. Yet the more she resisted, the stronger the attraction grew. It was no longer a simple fondness or appreciation. It was something raw, emotional, and consuming. Ethan seemed to sense her hesitation. There were moments when he would pause, studying her expression, letting the silence speak. There were gentle touches and an accidental brush of hands while passing. A tool, a soft guiding gesture when she leaned awkwardly over a shelf, and every gesture carried a promise, question, a longing. Lila noticed these nuances, and they made her wonder if he felt the same struggle, the same pull. One night, after a long day of arranging her apartment, they sat together on the couch watching the rain streak the window. The world outside seemed distant and irrelevant. Lila felt a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself, the kind that comes when you realize someone sees you, truly sees you. Ethan's eyes held a softness, an understanding, and a quiet intensity that made her heart ache. He reached over, brushing a stray hair from her face, and the small intimacy made her stomach twist with anticipation and nerves. "Lila," he began, hesitating, "I don't know what this is, or where it's going, but I can't ignore it anymore. Being here with you feels right, in a way I didn't expect." Her chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to tell him everything she felt, but the words felt too fragile, too heavy. Instead, she leaned slightly toward him, her hand brushing against his, and allowed the silence to communicate what words could not. The days following that evening were filled with subtle shifts. They spoke more openly, lingered longer, laughed more freely, and shared quiet glances that held meaning. The apartment, once a place of emptiness and unfinished tasks, became a space of warmth, connection, and discovery. Lila realized that the transformation wasn't just in the walls and furniture, it was in her heart, reshaped by his presence, his care, and the emotions he stirred. Yet, despite the growing closeness, there was an underlying tension, a question that neither dared voice aloud. What would happen next? Could they acknowledge the feelings without fear? Could they navigate the unspoken complexities of their connection without breaking the delicate balance they had created? One evening, as they hung the last painting on the wall, their hands met again. This time, neither pulled away. The contact lingered, electric and tender. Ethan's voice was barely audible over the soft hum of the apartment. "I don't want to hide this anymore," he admitted, his eyes searching hers. Lila felt a shiver run down her spine. "I don't want to either," she whispered. The room held its breath, and for a moment, everything else faded. There were no walls, no rain, no past obligations, only the two of them standing together in quiet understanding. And in that instant, Lila realized that life had shifted. Something profound had begun, born from simple gestures, shared spaces, and growing hearts. But just as the moment reached its quiet climax, a sudden knock on the door startled them both. Lila's pulse quickened. Who could it be at this hour? She exchanged a glance with Ethan, and the tension shifted once again. Leaving a question hanging in the air: would their fragile connection withstand the outside world? Or was it still too delicate to endure? The next morning, Lila woke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains. The apartment, once quiet and empty, now felt alive with memories of the previous days. Each corner reminded her of Ethan, his laugh, his patience, the way he had lingered by the windowsill while fixing a shelf, the gentle way he guided her hand when they had painted together. She smiled softly, feeling a warmth in her chest that made the room feel brighter than any sunlight could. She knew the feelings she carried for him had grown stronger, undeniable and yet terrifying. Part of her worried, what would this mean? Was it right for her to feel this way about her boss's son? Could she trust her own heart? But another part, a louder, bolder part, whispered that these feelings were real. And to ignore them would be to deny a part of herself she could know, longer contain. The phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it with a mixture of hope and fear. 'Twas a message from Ethan. "I'll be by later. There's something I need to tell you." Her pulse quickened. Something he needed to tell her. Could he feel the same? She replayed the moments. In her mind, the subtle touches, the lingering glances, the quiet confessions in shared silence, and wondered if he had been waiting for this, too. When the doorbell rang that afternoon, Lila opened the door to find Ethan holding a small box of flowers. "For you," he said simply, handing them to her. His eyes held a seriousness she had not seen before, and her heart skipped a beat. She led him inside, closing the door carefully behind him, aware of the tension building between them. They sat on the couch, the flowers between them, and for a moment neither spoke. The rain had returned, drumming softly against the windows, creating a private world around them. Lila's mind raced. Should she ask him what he wanted to tell her? Would his words confirm what her heart had been hoping for, or shatter the fragile connection they had built? Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low and steady, yet tinged with nervousness. "Lila, I can't stop thinking about you. Every time I come here, I realize I feel something I didn't expect. And I've tried to ignore it, tried to pretend it was just friendship, but it isn't. I can't hide it anymore." Breath caught in her throat. Her chest tightened, a mixture of relief, excitement, and fear flooding through her. She wanted to tell him she felt the same, but the words were heavy, fragile, and important. She took a deep breath and let the truth spill out in a whisper. I feel it too. I've been trying not to, but I can't anymore." A silence followed, not awkward, but profound. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath as they looked at each other, realizing the depths of what had been unspoken. In that moment, everything they had shared, the laughter, the small gestures, the quiet hours of companionship, made sense. The connection between them was no longer subtle or hidden, was tangible, real, and impossible to ignore. Ethan reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from Lila's face. The touch sent a shiver down her spine, and her heart raced with anticipation. "I was afraid," he admitted, his voice barely audible, "that this would complicate things, that it might ruin what we have. But I can't pretend anymore. Want to be honest with you, with myself?" Lila's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of relief and joy. "I want that too," she whispered. "I've been scared, but I can't deny it anymore." They sat there for a long moment, hands brushing, hearts pounding, and the rain outside creating a quiet, protective cocoon around them. For the first time, Lila allowed herself to fully feel what she had been suppressing: traction, longing, admiration, and a tender affection that had grown stronger each day. And in Ethan's eyes, she saw the same mixture reflected back: care, vulnerability, and a burgeoning love that felt as natural as breathing. Over the next few days, their bond deepened. They spent long hours together in the apartment, cooking, cleaning, and organizing, but also sharing quiet moments of intimacies, sitting close on the couch, exchanging glances that held unspoken meanings, or laughing together over small mishaps, like spilled paint or broken mugs. Each moment reinforced what they already knew. Their feelings were real, mutual, and powerful. Lila realized that she had been longing for someone who could see her, truly see her, not just as a tenant or a coworker's subordinate, but as a whole person, complex, flawed, and vibrant. Ethan had seen her in ways she hadn't expected, and in return, she had begun to see him in a new light. Beyond childhood memories or superficial charm, the man in front of her was kind, patient, attentive, and gentle, with a depth that made her heart ache in the best way. Ethan, too, seemed to change. The casual confidence he had once carried was now tempered with sensitivity, thoughtfulness, and a quiet attentiveness toward her. He remembered her smallest preferences, noticed her moods, and offered comfort when she was stressed or tired. Lila found herself leaning into him, trusting him more than she had trusted anyone in a long time. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Ethan reached for her hand, his fingers intertwined with hers, a simple act that carried immense meaning. "Lila," he said softly, "I don't know what the future holds, but I want to face it with you. I don't want to hide my feelings anymore, and I don't want you to hide yours. Let's be honest with each other, fully and completely." Her heart swelled. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I want that too. I've never felt this way before, and it scares me, but it feels right." From that moment, their relationship shifted. It was no longer subtle or tentative. It was a quiet, steady understanding that they were both invested in exploring what this connection could mean. They continued to spend time in the apartment, transforming it not only physically but emotionally into a home space filled with laughter, care, and intimacy. Each shared cup of coffee, each lingering touch, each conversation that went late into the night strengthened their bond. There were moments of doubt, of course. Lila sometimes questioned if their closeness might be too fast, too intense. Ethan worried about appearances and propriety, aware of the delicate balance between personal desire and social expectations. But they faced these uncertainties together, talking openly and honestly, learning to navigate the complexities of adult emotions without fear. One rainy afternoon, as they painted the living room a soft, comforting beige, Lila noticed the way Ethan's eyes softened whenever he looked at her. His focus wasn't on the walls or the brushes, it was on her, and the realization made her heart leap. She caught his hand lightly brushing against hers and didn't pull away this time. Instead, she let the moment linger, savoring the warmth, the electricity, and the quiet intimacy. "You've changed this place." "And me," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the gentle sound of rain. Ethan smiled, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her hand. "And you've changed me too," he admitted. "I didn't expect to feel like this, but now I can't imagine not feeling it." Days turned into weeks, and their connection deepened in ways that felt natural, inevitable, and unshakable. Lila found herself thinking of him constantly, anticipating his visits, savoring every shared laugh and gentle touch. Ethan reciprocated fully, showing patience, care, and a tenderness that left no doubt about his feelings. They built a rhythm together, a quiet harmony that balanced excitement, longing, and comfort. Despite the intensity of their emotions, they moved carefully, aware of boundaries and responsibilities. But never letting fear stop them from expressing affection. Simple gestures, a hand on the small of her back, a lingering glance across the room, whispered, "I'm glad you're here," became the language of their love. Intimate and powerful without needing words to define it. One evening, after a long day of minor repairs and rearranging, they sat on the couch together. The apartment now fully transformed into a warm, inviting home. Ethan reached for her, holding her hands in his. "Lila," he whispered, "I want to be honest. I want us to explore this, whatever it may become, without fear. Will you let me?" Lila felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, overwhelmed by relief, joy, and love. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. "I want that too. Never felt this way before, and I don't want to hide it anymore." They sat together in silence, the rain outside, creating a soft, protective world around them. For the first time, Lila felt truly seen, understood, and cherished. The apartment, once a place of loneliness and unfinished tasks, had become a home filled with warmth, connection, and love. And she knew that the simple favor that had brought Ethan into her life had changed everything. Not just the walls, the shelves, or the paint, but the very heartbeat of her life in the quiet. Gentle moments that followed, Lila realized something profound. Love often arrives unexpectedly, quietly, and softly, in ways that reshape life in the most beautiful and lasting ways. And as she leaned against Ethan, feeling his steady heartbeat against hers, she understood that their journey had just begun, and that whatever came next, they would face it together, hearts open and ready.